So, the idea of building and sustaining caring relationships with students is not something that Superintendent Berry is promoting out of a personal interest. There's actually a lot of scholarship on it that dates back to the early 1980s, where it emerged from the worlds of psychology and philosophy, particularly developmental psychology, moral philosophy, feminist moral theory, and attachment theory. You might have heard of Carol Gilligan and Nell Noddings. Gilligan is an American psychologist. She noticed that the moral development of girls is different from boys, in that it's based on relationships of caregiving and care receiving, on having caring feelings toward others, and on taking responsibility to care for others. Nell Noddings is an American philosopher. She also made this connection between morality and relationships, saying that reciprocally caring relationships between a carer and one who is cared for are the foundation of morality, assuming that we are all receivers of care as well as care providers, depending on the particular circumstances and relationship. She also said that ethical and moral decision-making should be based on caring and caring relationships. So while Gilligan was the first to use the term ethics of care in 1982 in her book called In a Different Voice, Noddings is the one who developed these ideas into a comprehensive theory in 1984 in her book called Caring. And the theory goes by two names now, ethics of care and care ethics. It's considered a normative moral theory, meaning a practical theory that tells us what is right and wrong and good and bad, that guides our actions and behaviors and ways of thinking, being, and interacting with others, and that informs us of what choices we ought to consider and what decisions we ought to make. So what is considered morally correct, right, and good according to care ethics? Well, cultivating and sustaining mutually caring relationships with others, and prioritizing the helping and supporting of those with whom we are in caring relationships, so those we are close to and who rely on us for care. So let me pause. I want to note that care here is not care as a virtue of care, as in Superintendent Berry is a caring person. It goes beyond one's individual character. It's more than a character trait in a set of corresponding behaviors. Instead, it's focused on the state of being in relationship with others and the relationship itself. So the word care actually represents several moral values and virtues that would characterize desirable relationships, including love, care, kindness, compassion, empathy, sympathy, sensitivity, trust, respect, acceptance, responsibility, attentiveness, understanding, and I'm sure you can think of others. And because of that, Noddings later called it an ethic of relation rather than care. But the theory was already well entrenched, and ethics of care and care ethics stuck. Noddings also adopted care ethics theory to schooling and teaching, primarily in regard to relationships between teachers and their students. She is a former elementary and high school math teacher and school administrator, so she knows her way around the classroom and school. She said that nurturing caring relationships with students is the correct thing for teachers to do as part of their job, part of their role. She also said that caring relationships is a means of moral education. So in the language that I use, it's both teaching morally and teaching morality. Nurturing caring relationships with students as a means of teaching morally, as the right thing for teachers to do, is probably more obvious than teaching morality. Just think of Rita Pierson and what she promotes. So let me take a minute to discuss how nurturing caring relationships is a means of teaching morality. And providing moral education for students. Within the context of these reciprocally caring relationships, where the teacher is the primary carer and the student is primarily the cared for, the teacher has a lot of influence on the students and on their moral development. And that influence is exerted in four ways. Firstly, through modeling. The teacher is able to demonstrate for the students how to be in caring relationships, how to care for others, how to meet the needs of others, and how a variety of moral values are expressed, like the ones I mentioned. The second is dialogue. In the relationship, the teacher and student are able to share of themselves, to learn about each other, and to meaningfully and authentically connect with each other. The students can openly express their needs, the teacher can respond in ways that are helpful and supportive, and the student can give feedback on the response. Such dialogue is full of opportunities for teachers to impart moral messages and lessons. The third is practice. In the relationship and to play a role in sustaining the relationship, the student practices the expression of several moral values. And in doing so, the student gains capacity for relational care, which can be applied in other relationships. And finally, confirmation. The teacher affirms the best intentions and motives of the student because the teacher knows the student well and is able to authentically say things like, I believe in you, I know you can do better, I know you are trying your best. And this encourages the students to strive toward a better self. So these caring relationships with each student are like a microenvironment, a micro context, in which morality can be imparted, practiced, and learned, in which the development of students' best selves can be nurtured, and in which several moral values can flourish. That's moral education. Now, I understand that these ideas are not entirely new to you, and that each of you practices a form of care ethics in your teaching. But you are transitioning to an education leadership role. So our job tonight is to apply the theory of care ethics and what you have been doing as teachers in the classroom to the role of instructional leadership. And let's begin our discussion with what you have been doing as teachers to cultivate caring relationships with your students and why, and if you think those methods will work in your role as instructional leaders.